Welcome everyone. Today we'll be talking about your day one of the foundation course. This foundation course is divided into 10 different sections. Now we'll be looking into your section 7, which is rendering and its navigation. So once you completely modeled your project, that is your base modeling and your interior modeling, including your propping for your entire space in the project, we can proceed with your rendering. For that, on the top here, you have something called image/videos. Just click it, or shortcut is Alt 0. And this will open up your rendering window. And when it comes to rendering in NAADI, you can take 5 different types of renders. First one is your perspective view or your single viewport shot. Second one is your 360-degree walkthrough or panorama render. Third one is your top view or your aerial render. Fourth one is your video or your animation walkthrough. And last is your 720-degree VR renders. Out of these 5 renders, in your day one, we'll be talking about 3 renders, which is your perspective, 360-degree walkthrough, and your 720 VR. And when it comes to camera navigation, it is same like your modeling, where in your mouse, if you press your left click, your camera will orbit. If you press your right click, your camera will pan. If you use your scroll button to scroll in, it will zoom in, or scroll out to zoom out. And in your keyboard, it is WSAD, Q and E. If you press W, your camera will move forward. Yes, your camera will move backward. A to move your camera left, D to move your camera right, and Q to move your camera above, and E to move your camera below. Eye control. Using that, you'll be able to precisely move your camera and set in your viewports. Before that, you first need to understand the UI of your rendering window here. So in your rendering window on top, you have a menu bar which you can use to shift between your different types of rendering here. And if you have taken any render, on the top right you have something called gallery, where the render progress or the completed render will be visible. You can access it here. In addition to that, on top right you have your preview window, where depending on your main screen viewport, your preview window viewport will change. And underneath it you have your camera settings tab on the right. On the left you have your render settings tab. So in that, first let's just look into your camera settings tab and how to set your viewport. So when it comes to camera settings here, first thing you'll notice on the side is FOV. FOV is called field of view, which controls how wide or how narrow your camera angle is. It will always be in standard, which is 60 degree. But if you want, you can go for a narrow angle shot. The maximum narrowness you can attain here is 30 degree. Or if you would like to go for a wide angle shot, you can increase it. But my personal recommendation is go to a maximum wide angle of 75. Okay, anywhere between 70 to 75 is optimal. If you increase beyond 75, you will notice that the models tend to distort. So in addition to your FOV, there is something called clipping here. Clipping will be greatly useful for you while setting up a viewport in a narrow space. I'll show you an example. So now I place my camera here in the bathroom, which is a narrow space in this project. And now if I want to set a viewport in a way where my entire bathroom is visible in one single shot, in that case, can you see this is the maximum viewport which I could go for. Okay, but in this current viewport I can't observe the entire bathroom, right? So in that case I can just move my camera somewhat behind, and now I can see to some extent it is visible, but still the entire part is not completely visible. So for that I can even further move my camera. But if you notice, if I further move my camera, can you see the wall which is behind my camera, it is interrupting my view. Okay, so this is where the clipping comes into play. So if you would like to set a viewport in a narrow space where you can place your camera behind the wall, let the wall interrupt your viewport, and try to increase your clipping sensitively to a point where the wall which is interrupting gets completely cut off. So now can you see, I can see the bathroom here clearly now. If I want, I can even further move my camera and I can slightly increase the clipping. So now can you see, in this viewport, I can completely see the bathroom from left to right. If I want, I can even further move my camera behind and increase the clipping. So now can you see, this is the viewport which you can get. Okay, so what this clipping would do here is, it will literally cut your model from behind your camera towards where you're focusing it. Okay, so that is the reason why I told you to clip it sensitively. Okay, till a point where the wall which is interrupting, if as soon as that disappears, just stop with the clipping point. You don't have to increase it further, because if you increase it drastically, you will see that the model is literally cutting towards where you're focusing at, right? It is like it is taking a section plane along the view. Okay, so that is what literally clipping here is. Okay, it is cutting the model from behind your camera towards where you're focusing at. In addition to that, you can even control the height of the camera here. So for a perspective shot or something, you can even precisely type in the human eye level here of 1500 or something, so it will be a much more accurate perspective view. So once you set your camera position precisely, at the bottom you have something called user views. Okay, under that you have something called save angle. Shortcut is Control D. If you click it, it will save your viewport. Saving viewport is like adding a scene in your SketchUp, where even if you move your camera and move it to completely different position, if you want to again jump back to the same position where you left, just click that saved viewport. Your camera will precisely move to the point with the same camera angle, clipping and the camera height. So this is what when it comes to your camera settings in this tool. In addition to that, if you would like to use your perspective correction, that can also be done. Perspective correction is nothing but generally if you take any viewport on a modeling, it will be in a 1-point perspective, okay, where the verticals will eventually converge based on your vanishing point. But when it comes to viewport, a general recommendation is to always go for a 2-point perspective where your vertical lines will precisely be vertical. In those cases, this perspective correction toggle will help you. For example, in this viewport, if you notice, this is right now in the single point viewport, okay, where the vertical lines, if you notice, is not precisely straight, it is diagonal, right? You can take any vertical lines, this one or this one, it won't be precisely straight, it will be tilted, okay. But as soon as I click on this perspective correction, you will see that all your vertical lines are precisely aligned. Can you see here? For a camera angle of this, the change is on a micro basis, but still you can notice the change. But if you're setting up your camera at the lower altitude and looking at the scene, where this perspective correction will be much more evident. I'll show you. So now can you see the vertical lines are extremely tilted at this point, right? So now if I toggle this up, you will see how this is eventually getting changed, right? So this is what when it comes to your perspective correction. If you're setting up your viewport, make sure that this perspective correction is always toggled on. And once that is toggled on and your FOV and your clipping point and the camera height, everything is proper, then you can click on save angle or press Ctrl D to save this viewport. Now let's look into the right render settings tab here. In that, the first setting here is called aspect ratio. Aspect ratio talks about the length is to width of this render. And here when it comes to aspect ratio, you will see 16:9, which is your landscape wide angle, 9:16, which is your portrait wide angle, 4:3 is your landscape normal shot, 3:4 is your portrait normal shot, and 1:1 is your square angle. So here all the aspect ratios what you are seeing are digital aspect ratios, which means your 16:9 or 9:16 is something that will be suitable for your phones. Majority of the phones right now follows the 16:9 or 9:16 depending on landscape or portrait mode. And this 4:3 or 3:4 is specifically designed for your monitors, TV, projectors and tablets. And this 1:1 is for your social media posting. So you have different digital aspect ratios here. You can select it according to your requirement. And once that is done, just underneath you have something called resolution. Resolution talks about the pixel quality in an image. So here in the perspective view, you can set in resolution from 1K till 8K. So my personal recommendation is if you are taking any test render, you can either go for 1K or 2K. But if you're going for a final render, I would always recommend you to go for 4K. So underneath it, you have something called ambient lighting. And for this ambient lighting, you have different categories and its preset. These preset will literally control the ambient lighting for the space. For that, first you need to understand what is ambient lighting, right? Here, when it comes to interior rendering, your lighting plays a very crucial role. And when it comes to lighting, you have two types of lighting. One is called your ambient lighting, another one is called your design lighting. Design lightings are nothing but lightings which are there in your design. Hence, it will be modeled in your project, it will be reflected in your renders, and it will also be executed in your sites. Those are called your design lightings. The best example for it is your spotlight, your IES lightings, your chandeliers, all this, your wall lightings, all this are called your design lightings. And there is a second category which is called your ambient lighting, where ambient lightings are non-design lightings, which means those lightings are actually not in your design. And now you must be wondering, in that case, why are we using it, right? The major purpose of the ambient lighting is to enhance the ambience. That's it. See here, when it comes to rendering, it is crucial that you make your rendering as visually pleasing as possible, right? So even though that space in your actual site might be a bit darker, might be low in brightness, it might be a bit dull, but in your renders, it eventually becomes the designer's responsibility to make it as visually pleasing as possible, right? So for that, we'll use this ambient lighting to enhance the ambience of the scene and to make it visually pleasing. Okay, and the best example of your ambient lighting is your rectangle lighting, your omni lighting. In some cases, designers might even use spot lighting as a part of your ambient lighting as well. So this is what the difference between your design lighting and your ambient lighting. And in your conventional tool, you'll be manually placing this ambient lighting for each and every space, where you'll be placing it on the ceiling or behind your camera to make your space much more brighter, right? But in this tool, you don't have to do that. All you have to do is just select the appropriate template, and the tool itself will take care of the ambient lighting by itself. Okay, so that is what this template here is. Okay, so here when it comes to template, you typically have three categories of ambient lighting templates. One is your fast, second one is your realistic, and third one is your equilibrium. Just underneath your ambient lighting, you have something called real-time rendering. Using this, you will be able to take your final detailed renders, which is something that we'll be focusing in your further sessions. And at last, you have something called environment. This talks about the outdoor HDR images in your project. This talks about the outdoor HDR image in this project. See, if you set your viewport in a way where your outdoor scene is visible, in those cases, your outdoor HDR image plays a very crucial role towards photorealism. So here under environment, you have different HDR images. You can select something that is equivalent to your project surrounding. And these are all the HDR images which you can access it quickly. And if you're looking for some more HDR image, you have something called Move tab here. If you click it, this will open up another window where you can even access some more interesting HDR images. Once you selected it, here at the bottom you have something called confirm. Click and that HDR image will be applied for your environment. So this is what when it comes to your rendering settings tab is. And once you set all these factors, on the left here is something called advanced setting. If you click it up, this will open up this tab. Here you have few more exclusive settings which you can toggle it on. In that, the most important thing is your specular reflection and your render complex material. So please make sure if you're taking any final quick render, this render complex material is always toggled in. And if your viewport has more number of reflective surfaces, reflection in the sense I'm talking about your reflectivity of the flooring, reflectivity of the components, your models, your slabs and everything. If you have more glossy surface area in that viewport, then I would recommend you to toggle on your specular reflection. Kindly note that by toggling these two parameters on, your rendering time will slightly increase anywhere between 30 to 40 seconds, but it's definitely worth it. So with this, your section 7 of day 1 foundation course is completed.